Okay. So in terms of empathic listening, what were some like takeaways for you guys in terms of what steps you need to take to use empathic listening? What are some of the things that you need to do?
Like relate?
Like what, yeah, so like what are some of the steps that you need to take when you're trying to carry out empathic listening? I'm going to
Like
pull this
relate
up for
to
myself.
the person?
Like,
Could you say that again? I'm going to turn on my volume.
You said like relate to the person?
Yeah, so in relating to the person, so kind of trying to see from their perspective, trying to kind of identify what emotions they're showing, and to kind of say, hey, you know what, I see that you're upset, or I see what's going on. Let's talk about it, right? What are some other steps in terms of empathic listening?
To have contact eye.
Yeah, definitely. So eye contact, right? So looking at the person like face to face, and being on the same level as them, shows them that you are really paying attention, that you're really focused on them, and that you kind of care about what they have to say.
I think like do the signs like the like they assure that you're sorry, you're listening to them, like they are not talking to the wall or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. So to use like little supportive sounds, and like cue, like verbal cues to them, even though you're not using words. Sorry, I'm going to turn off my Wi-Fi on my phone so it doesn't mess up the Wi-Fi here. Okay. That you're kind of saying, yeah, okay. So that's showing that you're interested and that you're kind of paying attention, right? So I'll kind of review some of the steps here again, and I'm going to show you a short clip that was not on iLearn, which I think is funny because it really shows an exaggerated form of this, but it's good to help recognize them. So one, you want to think about what other people are saying. So you want to put away distractions. You want to kind of not be worrying about anything else but them, right? And so it's even kind of saying, okay, I'm not going to look at anything else right now. I'm going to focus on you. Avoiding judgment is really important, right? Even though we want to kind of have a reaction and tell the person what we think that they're saying or what they did or what happened was bad, it's trying to stay away from doing that. And we've been practicing that a lot with our nonviolent communication. Speaking with encouragement, so that's letting them know, and you can just verbally say, I'm really glad that you're sharing this with me. Thank you so much. I appreciate that you're sharing this with me. Tell me more, right? Using like nonverbals and active listening. So like Edna said, the eye contact, using like a little supportive nod, right, is a small way to show somebody, yeah, you know, I'm paying attention, I get you. Smiling slightly, depending on what the person's sharing with you, but this can be a good way to show that you're open. Having really open body language, not kind of sitting back and being closed, but being kind of open. What else? What were some of the other ones I had? If the person's really upset, like you can give them light supportive touch, so kind of on the arm or the elbow, if it's appropriate to do so, and kind of just mirror where they're at, and also leaning in, right? So if you're sitting, you don't want to sit back, you want to sit forward to show them that you care. In terms of showing empathy, you know, acknowledging their feelings, acknowledging their emotions, even if you're wrong, right? They'll tell you, oh, I actually don't feel that way, I feel this way, but it's just saying, hey, I see something's up, right? Asking for clarification without judgment. So if the person's really excited, they'll kind of talk really fast and it's going to be hard to tell what's going on. Or if they're really upset, similar thing. So this is saying, oh, okay, like, I know you're really excited about this. Could you repeat that for me again? Just to try to get more info, but you're not stopping the flow of what they're saying. And then providing non-evaluative feedback. This is super important, and can be hard. This is where you kind of summarize what they said and you put it in your own words and you ask them if that's correct, right? So it's kind of saying, hey, so what I'm hearing is that you are really frustrated because you know, we're supposed to work 20 hours this week and they scheduled you for 40. Okay, so you're just repeating what they said in your own words. Okay, so let me show you this clip because this is like a really good exaggeration of this, and we can kind of talk about why this does not work. Let me pull up. Hold on. Where are all my screens here? Can you guys see my YouTube screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, when you're selling to women, it is crucial that you listen, Dwight. Also, you want to respect their... Are you listening now?
Yes,
Okay, well, you have to show us.
that's impossible. Listening happens in the ear and in the brain. I mean, some organisms have external hairs that vibrate to indicate auditory stimulation, but unfortunately, our external hairs don't vibrate at all.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
What are you doing?
A little smile and a nod shows that I hear you. Got it?
Kind of.
Nellie, why don't you tell Dwight what we were doing earlier today, and Dwight, you show us that you're listening.
Well, we were in the warehouse where we were discussing the mural that I've commissioned Pam to paint there. We were talking about the colour schemes and the major themes we want to hit. Children of the world coming together, cutting down trees to make paper, but not in a child labouring way.
It's just up and down. Just a regular nod, like a person.
I am a person.
Of
Yes.
course, you're a personal. We can do this, all right? And then we thought I can't carry on with that face. Look at it, I'm going to get nightmares with that face. I mean, he looks like he is labouring over a stool having just eaten human flesh.
It's a bit extreme.
No, I'm sorry, but that is true.
He's screwed. The meeting's in less than an hour.
Okay, so what were some things that you all noticed that Dwight was doing wrong?
His face looked like uneasy, like almost uncomfortable.
Yeah, he looked like he was really straining, right?
Yeah.
What were some other things about his face that looked like incorrect?
His eyes.
Yeah, so he was trying really hard to make eye contact to the point that it was too much, right? So like if you make eye contact with somebody, you know, in conversation, you're paying attention to them, you'll look at them, you kind of slightly look away, you'll look back at them, you'll look away, right? So it's not super intense. But for him, he was like staring like a lot, right? So it was too much. So you want to like avoid that. And Miguel's saying that he took their advice too literally. Yeah. What else did he do that was like too much?
Nodding constantly, like it's like it just makes it even more over the top. Not really like pausing to see when they were stopping.
Yeah, so you're right. He was not picking up on their cues, and he was nodding, and it looked like his head was just gonna like fall off, right? So you just want to do like a little tiny nod. Oh, one more thing. Was there anything else that he did that was not correct? What about his smile, right? So he was, instead of doing like a supportive smile, I think of as like a toothless smile. It's just kind of, right, just with your lips. But he was like smiling like in a way that was just way too big, right? So it was just kind of too much. So you want to think about all of those steps that he took, but you scale them back to how you would kind of normally do it. You just want to do this more intentionally, okay? So for the journal, I'd like you to, and listen to the lesson plans that I have on iLearn. The first few minutes at least have the empathic listening review. And so I'd like you to practice that with someone. I'm sure there are a lot of people that you could listen to right now who either have something they need to get off their chest or have just some concern on their mind. This would be a really good opportunity to use that. So try to practice that with someone. You can do it through video chat. If it's someone who lives in your home, you can do it in person. You do it over the phone. Just try to use these. And if you're doing it over the phone and you're not doing it like in video, you can still practice these things and use those nonverbals, because it really does influence like how you speak and listen to the other person. Okay, let me close that so I know we talked about that in my notes. Okay, in thinking more about groups and group dynamics, there are issues. I'm sure like most of you, when you have done group work for classes or at work, you'll notice that sometimes things go really well and sometimes things can really go wrong in groups. Like there are a lot of issues that can happen. So in terms of what can happen in groups when things go wrong, usually they can be attributed to some sort of like common issue. So that may be weak leadership, right? So within a group, if there is not a defined leader, or if the defined leader is not really taking on the responsibilities that they should, usually somebody else who's kind of more dominant in terms of their personality will kind of take over. And this could kind of lead to infighting within the group. This could kind of get the group stuck in the storming phase. And so it can just kind of really keep the group from achieving what it should be achieving. Another issue though could be excessive deference to authority. So this is when people want to be seen as someone who like agrees with whoever's in charge. And so in feeling like it's important to agree to kind of keep the peace within the group, they may hold back their own opinion. And that can be an issue when decisions are being made, because when that happens, like people can have a really good and important point. They may see something that nobody else sees, but they're afraid to say something about it, right? So they'll just be quiet, and that can lead to really disastrous things. Okay, and then blocking, right? This is when some team member behaves in some way that gets in the way of the functioning of the group, right? So there's different roles that can happen that can really get in the way of the group. And think about if you've seen any of these. There's the aggressor. So this is the person who's just a contrarian. They're always disagreeing with other people. They're really outspoken and they're just disagreeing just to disagree, right? They're kind of throwing a wrench in everything because they want to be the center of attention. The negator. So this is the one who just shoots down everybody's ideas all the time. Even if they're really good ideas, they're like, no, it's not going to work. No, 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 right? And that can really get in the way of the group kind of coming together. The withdrawer. This is a person who just kind of like sits back, doesn't participate in discussion, who just kind of like turns in on themselves. So that can be very unproductive. The recognition seeker. So this is somebody who really likes to talk about themselves. They're boastful. They tend to kind of dominate what is going on in the meeting or with any interaction with the group, and they want to talk about themselves. also the joker. So this is the person who uses humor, which can be a good thing, but they use it at inappropriate times, right? As a way to kind of distract, and it can keep the group off track, right? So a lot of these can come out when a group has to make a decision. So let me pull up another visual for you all. Let's see if I can make that smaller. Okay. Okay, so make this smaller for myself. All right, so in terms of these different steps that tend to happen when groups are making decisions, compressed, or they can be kind of stretched out. So they can happen, several can happen at once, or like they can all happen over a long period of time, right? So one, the group identifies the decision to be made. So this is where they kind of realize, okay, we have to make a choice, or we have to have this task completed. And so here they're kind of trying to define what the decision itself is. In the second step, this is where they're gathering information. So usually when a group has to perform a task to get there, right? So this is where you're getting all of that information before you make that choice. Now, kind of an important thing in this step is making sure that you're using really relevant sources that are trustworthy, and also getting as much information as possible. So trying to avoid confirmation bias, trying to avoid information that's just going to reinforce what you already believe, is taking in everything that's out there and saying, okay, what's available and how is that going to help us? And maybe it might challenge what we already think, and that's a good thing, okay? Third, identifying alternatives. So in terms of identifying alternatives, this is saying, okay, these are all the different potential paths that we could take. Okay, these are all the options that we have. And this is an important step because this is really the brainstorming. This is saying, okay, these are all the different ways we can go, and we want to think about which of these is going to be best. And that's where the next step, number 4, weighing evidence comes in. So in terms of weighing evidence, this is where you're kind of taking the information that you gathered and saying, okay, if we take this route, this is what might happen. If we take this route, this is what might happen. So it's kind of like imagining what could take place if you make that choice. And then 5th, and tell me if I'm going too fast, but at any point. 5th is choosing among alternatives, right? So this is saying these are all the choices that we had. We weighed what could happen with each of them, and now we're going to make a choice. What do we think is the best? And there's never going to be a perfect decision, right? Usually there's going to be some benefit and some like detraction from any choice. And so this is just saying, okay, looking at all of that, what seems to be the best? What's going to benefit the most people, or what's going to be the most just, or whatever it might be. And then 6 is taking action. So this is where the group actually makes the decision, where they actually carry out their task, or they actually do what they're set out to do. This is the doing phase. And then in step 7, this is where they review the decisions. So groups that work well, after they make a choice, they kind of step back and say, okay, so this is a choice that we made. How did it play out? Did it work well? Did it not work well? What could we have done better? So this is a self-evaluation. And especially like when groups are creating laws or policies, this is important. A law can be created in thinking that it's going to benefit a lot of people, and then you can find out that there's a lot of problems with it. So that's the review phase, is when they say, okay, you know what, we need to adjust this, we need to fix it, right? And so then you go back and make some other choices. Okay, so let me stop sharing this one. Okay, I'm going to break you guys out into groups and I'm going to give you an activity. So I'm going to give you a survival scenario. So I will put the instructions in notes, but I'll explain it to you right now. So you're going to be divided into 2 groups. And in these groups, I am going to give you, well, should I do 2 or 3? We'll do 3 groups. So in this survival scenario, so your group was in a plane crash, but luckily you all survived. Okay. And this crash took place in northern Canada. If any of you have done this before, just kind of keep this in mind. So it's in northern Canada. It's really cold. It's kind of freezing. There's snow on the ground. You're in a really wooded, like, area in the mountains, okay? So there's creeks nearby, but the nearest town is 20 miles away, okay? So you all are dressed in clothes that were just for your trip. You're going to like a business meeting, and you all managed to save a few items. So I'm going to post these in here. Okay, so this is a list of items. And in terms of this list of items, I want you in your group to put these in order. Okay, so I want you to put these in order of what you think is going to be most useful for your survival. So the most useful is going to be at the top of your list, and the least useful is going to be at the bottom. Okay, so as a group, you have to kind of decide how this is going to happen. Okay, so let's see. So I'm going to put you into these groups. I'll check in with you in a few minutes. So as a group, you want to decide who, what order you're going to put them in. So maybe somebody should be recording that for the group. So I'll give you like 5 to 7 minutes. Okay. How is this going to work? Great. Okay. So let me open the room so then I'll check in with you. So you should be getting an invitation, I think. Great. Haley, are you there?
Yeah, I haven't got any thing.
Oh, it has you like listed in a group.
Is it on iLearn?
No, it should be here in Zoom. You should get like an invitation.
Or okay.
Okay. start recording again. All right, so to think then back on group decision making, when you're in a group, like if it works well, great, things kind of function positively. Some things that can like in group decision making could be conformity. So like if a group ends up going along with what everybody else said, you know, that's kind of like earlier when people kind of decide that they just want to agree and they don't speak up when they need to. Group polarization is another thing. So you may have groups where people kind of tend to start to pull in different directions, and they can end up, even though they were kind of started in the middle, because maybe they don't like each other or they want to kind of jockey for power, they may end up becoming really, really separate and saying, well, I don't want to believe that what you believe. And so they don't find any middle ground, right? And also like the group could start to see itself as very cohesive and see anybody from outside the group is wrong, right? So when you get people who are kind of like-minded together, they may end up becoming kind of extreme, and they may kind of like start saying like, yeah, we're right, we're totally right, we're always right, and then kind of push everybody else out, and then they start to kind of really feel that anybody who's not in the group is bad, right? And we can see that politically, that happens a lot. And obedience to authority, right? And I kind of mentioned that in the last class, I think, about cults, is kind of feeling, well, if anybody's in charge, it means that they're good, and any decision they make is a good decision, even though it probably is not, right? So people might just say, well, we have to go along with what we're told. We have to go along with what the group, what we're being given to do, because if we speak up, then that's a bad thing, right? And that kind of works into the bystander effect. So with the bystander effect, this is when people are witnessing something happening and they don't step in to help because they feel like anybody who is there probably has already done something, right? And say like if they, what's an example of that? If you're driving down the street and you see a car that's broken down, usually the assumption is, well, the person has a cell phone, they've made a phone call, or somebody else has helped them, and we keep going, right? When in actuality, maybe that person really does need help. And we kind of just keep going because we assume somebody else. And then social loafing is another one in which people kind of tend to exert less effort towards a goal because they feel like, well, everybody else can take care of it, I don't have to do it, right? And I'm sure a lot of you have experienced that in your own group work. And finally, like the biggest problem with group decision making can be groupthink. So this is where the desire for everybody to come together and have consensus to make a decision that everybody agrees upon, to have agreement, comes before making the right choice, right? Because people don't want to rock the boat. And so the issue is a group they may come to a decision too quickly. They may not think about all of the alternatives. And so the decision they come to could be wrong because they haven't explored all of the other alternatives. Or people who need to speak up have not spoken up. So a big example of when groupthink happened was the Space Shuttle Challenger. This was in the mid-80s. And what happened was NASA kind of like had this environment where groupthink was really happening, right? So they believed that designing and putting the Challenger together, there was this one little piece called the O-ring, and it had to do with sealing some pieces together. And there was a faulty design in it, and it was not working properly, especially because it was really cold, right? And they kind of, some people knew there was an issue with it, but they thought, well, we can't make any wrong choice, it'll be okay. And then the Space Shuttle Challenger was launched, and then like a few minutes after it launched, it blew up and everybody on board died, right? And so that is used as a really good example of why groupthink is dangerous, right? So some of the symptoms of groupthink, and then we'll talk about a solution, right? And we'll practice that solution quickly. But in terms of symptoms that happen when there's groupthink, there's one, the illusion of invulnerability. So that's when a group thinks that because they're a group, that they're good and nothing bad can happen because they're together, right? So with the NASA example, they felt like, well, we're NASA. How could we make anything wrong? Like, how could we do anything wrong? So we're invulnerable to bad decisions. Second, there's a belief in the inherent morality of the group. So that goes along with this, thinking that because you're a group, any decision that the group makes is a good one, right? And not thinking, hey, maybe a group can really make a bad, wrong decision. Then there's third, collective rationalization. So with collective rationalization, that is where they kind of say, okay, there's bad things could happen, but it's not going to, right? And it's not kind of questioning things because it says, well, we don't have to worry about that, right? Fourth is out-group stereotypes. So I kind of mentioned that earlier. So it's when the group really comes together and they believe that anybody who's not in the group is a threat, right? So anybody who's not in the group who questions them, there must be something bad about them and you can't believe them. Even if somebody from outside the group has a really good point to make, they'll say like, no, 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 they're not in our group. We can't listen to them. And then there's self-censorship. So this is where somebody who does notice that there's a problem does not speak up, right? So like there was a person who was an engineer in their group. He noticed that there was a problem, but he didn't want to cause any problems, so he didn't say anything, right? And if he had said something, potentially maybe that could have helped snap them out of this groupthink. The illusion of unanimity goes along with that too, is the belief that everybody is in agreement, even if people are not, right? So it's just saying, well, we're together and we're going to be together and we're right. Then there is the direct pressure on dissenters. So if you do have somebody who's brave enough to speak up, everybody can kind of pile on them and they can say, well, you're just trying to like tear us apart and you're bad, right? And so when we looked at what can happen online, right, when people are trolling other people, that kind of direct pressure happens very frequently. Maybe if there's somebody who goes against the norm of the group, everybody can jump on them. And then you have mind guards, right? So these are people who try to kind of protect whoever the leader is from anybody who might criticize them. So they're also ones who will put pressure on dissenters or kind of say like, hey, don't question this person because they're in charge and they're good, right? So all of this can insulate a group from finding out when their decision is wrong or bad, right? Okay. Sorry, I'm talking a lot, but I'm gonna give you something to do in a second. Okay, so how can we avoid this, right? What are things that we can do instead to help avoid making bad decisions as a group, avoiding groupthink? We should explore kind of alternatives really well. So spend a lot of time doing brainstorming. Think about what our purpose is. So if the group kind of tends to get off track, thinking about, okay, what is our goal? How can we get back to that goal? Encouraging ideas to be challenged without reprisal. So making sure that it's okay for somebody to speak up and that they won't be kicked out for that. Thinking about different risks and kind of thinking about what assumptions are, right? So not assuming that the group is going to be perfect. And making sure that there's a lot of information that's gathered, okay? So try to be as objective as possible. So different ways to do this. I mentioned brainstorming a lot. This can be a really good way to kind of think of all the alternatives and spending a lot of time just in brainstorming before any decisions are made. Just saying, okay, let's really just take a lot of time to think about anything we could possibly do. There is this Delphi technique where members of the group can kind of express their opinion without knowing the whole group's decision first. So that can help people to be more independent in their thinking. And then third one that I'm going to have us practice is called the 6 thinking hats, right? So this helps the team to look at a problem from many different points of view because everybody has an assigned role in the group. And so in following that assigned role, they're able to say, okay, my job here is to do this. How can I use this to help us to make a good choice? Okay. So with these hats, let me see, I could probably post this in our chat. Oh, come on. Let me try to copy this one more time. Am I still here or did I freeze?
You're still.
I'm here? Okay. Let me try one more time. This is not really cooperating with me. It's not letting me paste. Today's not my day. Okay, I'll show it to you I'll just share that screen and then I'll talk about them. Okay, so in terms of these different roles, we have the white hat, right? So with the white hat role, this is where the person's job is to think about data, right? So their job is to think about how can I help by doing research, right? This is the person who gathers information for the group, okay? This is a person who finds other sources. They really help to think about the problem from a large point of view. Bold that. Okay, the red hat is somebody who is kind of working from their gut reaction, right? They're saying, I have a feeling about this that it's good, or I have a feeling that this is bad. This is the person who's paying attention to emotion. We have the black hat. So this is the person who is kind of the naysayer, but in a positive way, right? So this is the person who says, hey, you know what? We're thinking about this. We want to make this decision, but what could go wrong? All right, what could go bad? How can we kind of protect ourselves from that? Okay, so this really helps the group to be resilient. The yellow hat is somebody who thinks really positively. Okay, so they are the person who says, hey, you know what can go right? What are some of the good things that can happen because of this choice? There's the green hat. And so with the green hat, this is the person whose job it is to think creatively, to say, hey, what are all the different ideas we can come up with and how can we be really innovative with our solution, right? Sometimes we can get kind of stuck in something and not think creatively about it. And then the blue hat, right? This is the person who just keeps the group on task. They're into process control. So they're kind of like, okay, let's come back together. Let's make this choice. Let's kind of come back to what we were talking about, right? Let me see one more time if I can copy this and share it with you all. If not, I'll try to leave the screen up. It's not working for me. Come out of the chat. I don't know. It doesn't like me at this moment. So I'll leave that screen up. Can I link that to any of you guys? Okay, so we got white hat, red hat, black hat, yellow hat, green hat, blue hat. I'm going to divide you into 2 groups. And so what I would like you to do is to, within your group, think about, we don't know like if classes are going to be in person next semester, right? I think it depends a lot on what's going to happen with the health situation in the country. So what would we do? Like, what do you think should be done about school? I saw that some schools are going to continue online. Some schools are going to just pause and not have any classes during the semester. Some schools are trying to get technology out to students who don't have it. So what do you think like should be done, right? What are some alternatives that could be used? How should like schools proceed? So I'll give you guys a few minutes to kind of talk in your group about what you think should be done. And think about who's going to take on what role. So who's going to be the process person? Let me see if I can type it here. That worked. Okay, so I'm just going to type them in. Right. So the white hat person is information gathering. You have red hat, which is intuition. Okay. You have the black hat. Green hat. Blue hat. Okay. You know what, actually, let's not break out in the group because I think my technology is not really functioning so well. So I would just like us to think about this, think about what role you might pick for yourself, but what do you think like the school should do? Like if we cannot have in-person classes?
Probably like give the option to those who do want to do online to continue online, but I know it's online isn't very, it's not an option that everyone has. Like I think of it more like as a privilege, like you have privilege to have like a computer, working computer and Wi-Fi that works. So if you do have that privilege, like, and you can accommodate to that, move forward with online classes. But if it's not something that's really like fit for you, then to have the option to do like a semester off or yeah, probably that.
So keeping an online option for people who want to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. What are some other ideas that you guys have?
I think that having a certain place, like it's difficult because it depends on like the level of federal control, but if it's a free option whether or not to meet in person, having online classes isn't the same. Like no one can argue that it's like the same thing.
No.
So having the way that grades are distributed, I think would be something that would have to consider different elements. So if online classes were to continue, I think along with curriculum, of course, what would really need to be reworked is like scales on everything. Because my like fear that like arises when I think about like, oh, what does it mean like if I'm transitioning and like what can like things be done is like making sure that the scales still match, because if people don't have the same level of access to online classes, or if you're in an online class but the way that you learn is not like going to match that, the scale overall, like for like the national level, would need to be readjusted in terms of like, what does GPA mean? So if you're applying to grad school or showcasing like your like graduation to someone who would hire you, it's understandable on like a certain like well stated platform that this is like why this is like in the same stage, because we might be applying for things like way past this, and like, is there a clause that needs to be like stated, like with any like paperwork that goes on, like keep in mind like what occurred during this time frame, or like maybe like students who graduate or in the process of graduating need to fill out a like a form, like with a written like do like a 100-word like essay, like what we do for like written applications to places, as like an extra step.
That grade.
Give people their own chance to explain it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I don't know if they emailed you guys yet, but they're considering just churning all the classes to pass fail. So that way, because it's so stressful on all of you, rather than having to worry about getting all these little things done to get a grade, that you would just know, okay, I did enough that I can pass the class and I'm going to be okay. Because I think, yeah, that's a good point, that grading the normal way that like grading is done doesn't really function so well in this kind of online situation. Plus everybody's stressed out. It's just not the same, right? And I really wouldn't trust any of us to do a lot of really heavy grading right now because we're under a lot of stress too. And you guys, like trying to do all of these like assignments is really challenging, right? Now, like people want to stay on track, right? And they want to graduate on time when they were originally planning to graduate. Does anybody think that maybe schools who are deciding just not to hold any classes in the fall, if that's like an option that seems like a good one? Or does anybody have a strong feeling like no?
I think I'm like impartial. I feel like as of right now, I feel like I'm not learning like or retaining any information.
Hard to remember things, right?
And like I don't know, all my like time's off, so like I'm turning in assignments extremely late just because I just have no concept of time anymore. So I feel like it's almost like not like there's no point to have online classes because it's not like I'm like engaged or like really getting anything out of it. But at the same time, I don't like the idea of absolutely doing nothing. That's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, that seems kind of scary, right? To just put everything on pause completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it, you know, it's different. Like if you guys had signed up for online classes at the beginning of the semester, knowing that they're going to be online is very different from starting out and having all of your emotions and mind in the zone of like in-person classes and then have that change.
Yeah, especially I don't have a room at my house. I've been sleeping on the couch. So it's just not the best learning environment.
No. You know, if you can't get enough rest, your mind's not going to work the way it normally would.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that kind of stress, right? And then I do wonder about students who don't have homes to go back to or don't have safe homes to go back to. How is that going to impact them, right? Yeah, it has a lot of ripple effects. Any other thoughts on that? Okay, I know you guys are all really tired. What I will do is I will email you because we should start thinking about your final project. And if I need to adjust that to make it kind of more doable for all of you guys, I'm very open to that. Okay, so I'll email you out the guidelines. I believe they're up on iLearn, but I'll double check. So I'll email you all as a reminder. For next week, what do we have coming up? Let me just double check. No, wrong class. Okay. So make sure to do journal 18. Oh, okay. For Monday, there is a link to the film Accidental Courtesy. And so if you log in under the Canopy account, you can watch it for free. There's links there. And I will post up some of the reading questions to go along with it. We'll adjust as needed, but we'll kind of like start looking at our upcoming assignment. But that book, the film is really interesting because it's a way in which a person used empathic listening. So this gentleman who's an African-American blues musician traveled around the country and ended up becoming like listening to and becoming friends with people who were members of the Ku Klux Klan. And through them being friends with him, they realized that like they were wrong, and a lot of them gave up being part of the Klan. So it's a good example of how empathic listening can work. And there's some examples in it when it doesn't really work, right? Where the person he's not listening in the way that he normally would, because he's dealing with some younger activist African-American males. And it's interesting that he doesn't use the same empathy that he does with other people. So it's a really good film. Okay. I hope you all have as much of a restful weekend as you can, and I will talk to you all soon. Okay. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.